My husband has been a park ranger for years now, and he's got a handful of scary things that have happened to him over his time just trying to maintain the park and do his job. One that always gets to him is when he was working on a segment of trail, fixing it. I don't recall precisely what he was doing, but he saw a rare sight that you pretty much never see in nature. A pack of wolves. Now, off in the distance, there was a large meadow. At the end of this meadow was a steep hill, littered with sparsely placed fir and oak trees. The wolves, an entire pack of them, were running at high speeds down this hill, then across the meadow. As my husband watched this happen in front of him, he saw that these wolves weren't just running to a destination in mind. They were clearly spooked. Spooked by something. The entire pack, mind you. That's when they were crossing the meadow, and a loud guttural scream came roaring far from the distance from the direction that they had just come from. Few of the wolves in front of the pack nervously turned their heads to look behind them in the course of the screaming. The scream lasted for a whopping 12 to 14 seconds, my husband had told me. Whatever made the screaming had to have a massive set of lungs. There's nothing out there in the woods that makes that kind of noise. Not to his knowledge. My husband also has extensive wilderness survival training and knows just about every animal that you can run into out there. He's never heard anything like that scream in his entire life. It scared him more than it scared the wolves that were running from it. I used to work in the Forest Service. I worked as a park ranger for many years and have my fair share of creepy tales and stories. In fact, I could honestly write a book about all my happenings during my time as a ranger, but I will leave you with just this one. My story took place in Yellowstone many years ago. I will not reveal the exact location because the park is so large, but people in that area have reported at the time strange noises and seeing large shadows moving around. As a park ranger, you have to learn to deflect information with what is real and what is not true. Lots of people see things because they get paranoid when they are outside of their element. It is a natural human occurrence. We had been warning people that the area might not be safe, but there was a couple that decided to not only camp in that area, but camp so far back beyond the trail where they were not allowed. Their tent and belongings were discovered only a few days later, off trail, by hikers. The disturbing part of the story was that they were missing. Their tent and all of their belongings were scattered, bloody, and torn up. It clearly looked like their campsite had been ravaged. It could have possibly been a mountain lion attack, or even a bear. About a quarter mile away from the campsite, we found something. Further away from the trail, we found an unknown and unidentified pile of scat. We weren't able to pinpoint it to a specific animal in the area, but it resembled that of huge dog poop. It did not resemble bear scat or mountain lion scat in any way. Samples were obtained and taken in for analysis. When the tests came back, there were no signs of any human remains in the scat. However, various other remains of animals were in this scat, like small pieces of bone, tissue, etc. Whatever poop it was, it clearly came from a carnivorous animal. If it was waste that came from a wolf, mind you, it was the most considerable wolf droppings I've ever seen in my life. Because this case involved 2 missing persons, the police had to be called in and an actual investigation followed after. The result of the investigation was that the couple were never found, even through extensive searching of the area for days afterward. I think this couple even made it into one of David Paulides' books, Missing 411, though I'm not too sure. This kind of thing happens far more than you would ever believe. To my knowledge, no bodies were ever recovered. Park ranger here had a terrifying experience back in the fall of 2016 when the whole clown craze was going on. Let me explain. Back in early October, I was scheduled to work on a night shift. From my lookout point, I could see what appeared to be fire from a short distance away. When I went to go investigate, and I could get closer, it appeared that it was actually looking like a congregation of people holding torches. What in the hell? Why would there be people out here in the middle of the night? At least 50 of them holding torches in a semicircle. Now, the first thing that came to my mind is some kind of satanic ritual circle. That within itself is far above my pay grade, and I wasn't about to go and try and interrupt that. But I got a better look at the situation, and to my horror, it was some sort of ritual. What I was looking at was about 60 to 70 people dressed up in clown costumes. I'm talking full makeup and everything. Each one of them holding a torch, standing in a loose circle. They weren't talking or doing anything. I don't recall them making any noise whatsoever, just staring off into space or staring off blankly at each other. I ran back to my post immediately and called my boss and told him what was going on. He told me to not hesitate to phone the police if I considered anything to get out of hand. I quickly kept a look on the situation and saw that they were dividing into what looked like groups of 2 from what I could see and venturing off into the woods, all separately in every which direction, except the direction where my post was at. I don't know if there's some sort of clown ritual or some sort of cult that meets up and dresses like that, but the experience was weird. This was about 1:45 a.m. in the morning and lasted maybe the entirety of a whole 15 minutes before they all dissipated into groups of 2 off in the night wilderness. I have no explanation at all for what I saw that night, nor do I know anything about a clown cult. I'm a former park ranger Forest Service employee. I've spent far too much time out in the forest and have taken away too many awful memories from that career path. I've seen people who have gone out into the woods by themselves and hung themselves. I've seen people who got lost and died of exposure. I've been on search teams where we would go to rescue somebody, and they're not to be found anywhere. The worst is when you encounter missing children, and if you've ever heard or listened to anything about missing children, then you'll know and understand just how awful that is. It's a job that you have to learn to be hardened and put aside your emotions to deal with the task at hand. However, that's in regard to the emotional and traumatic side of things that you deal with on the job. Then, there's an entirely different segment of the job. The segment of the job that puts you in fear and harm's way. It's probably no surprise to you that there are things in the wilderness that we have no idea what or where they came from. I can't sit here and boast to you that I've seen stairs in the middle of the woods. No, nothing like that. No portals, nothing crazy. But that doesn't mean that I haven't spoken with colleagues that have, and have had vivid nightmares about things they've witnessed by themselves. For me, I had never truly felt terror until this specific day, where I was looking for an individual that had been reported last seen on this trail in an area. He had only been missing for a few hours, and I was checking the trail in which he was last seen on. I couldn't help but shake this feeling that something was watching me. At first, I figured it was the lost hiker, and maybe he was trying to get best my attention. I realized quickly that that wasn't the case. This, whatever I was feeling, had an energy to it. A really bad feeling. I could sense it in my stomach. You know how just like when you feel like you're in severe danger, you just have this pit in the bottom of your stomach, like you know something bad is about to take place. That's what I felt. I kept glancing over my shoulder in hopes this lost hiker would step out and show gratitude to me for finding him. Well, that never happened. Instead, I began to see moving shapes around me, hidden behind the trees. Maybe shapes aren't the best terminology to use here. It was more like blurred, opaque figures, if that makes sense. Like something was cloaked. You can't make this stuff up. I was really beginning to freak out. And against my better training and experience out in the woods, I began doing what years and years of training taught me not to do. Panic. I was coming up on a part of the trail where I know I could cut through and get back to the main base area in just a mile. The trail I was on looped around, and had I continued on with the trail, it would have taken me much more time to get back. Because I knew the trail so well and where my location was, I used that to my advantage and cut through the woods to make my way back swiftly. The feeling followed me, and I stopped glancing back over my shoulders to see if these opaque, blurred shapes were following me. Instead, I put my full focus on getting back to base and reporting that I did not find an individual. I safely made it back after hauling it like I had since training and trying to keep up with my superiors. The entire experience was nerve-wracking, and the rest of the day, I just felt so off. Drained of energy, as if I had just ran 12 miles and spent the entire day out in the hot, blazing sun. Let me explain this to you. At the time, I was in top physical prime condition. Naturally, I was a machine and walked 20,000 plus steps a day. I kept in great shape, and it took a lot for me to feel as drained as I did. I've not had a day on the job where I felt like this, or remotely close. A measly 2.5 mile stroll on a trail like that wasn't going to do that to me. I remember feeling severely dehydrated too. Like whatever was following me zapped me of my energy and hydration. I know fear can do a lot of things to you, but that seemed to be an overkill, drastically. I don't know what things I saw in the woods stalking me, but I felt nothing but bad energy radiating off of these things. I felt like I was a deer being hunted, and that if I stopped for more than a minute, I was done for. I've told several of my colleagues about the same story, and to my horror, they have similar stories with very similar beings, as they call them. Maybe I'll share some of them with you sometime when I get more time to sit down and write it all out. Thanks. So, I went over to a friend's house, and he lives close to a national forest. We decided to start a fire and just relax for a bit outside. He had to go see what his sister was doing and walked off. I stayed and watched the fire, and it slowly died to embers in about 5 minutes, right after he left. It was a blazing fire, and no way that it should have went out that fast. So, it goes out, I put music on, and I start to hear almost like joints popping, kind of like bubble wrap. I thought nothing of it, but it kept getting closer. I turn around with my flashlight, and I see this creature with no eyes, ears, or mouth. Basically, a crawler. I jump up and drop my phone, quickly run to my free porch, and look back, and it just stares at me, and I see his fingers around each of the tree. Fingers 8 inches or longer. Then it bolts off, and it was so deformed that it ran like a cheetah, without making noises. I tell my friend, and we go look for his sister, and hear noises like voices and animal sounds around us, and keep seeing things. We get them, and they don't believe us. We walk back to the house, and everything seems fine, but after a while, my back feels hit and aches a little. We lift up my shirt, and there are scratch marks, but no blood. It looked almost like whip marks, and me and my friend are nail biters. I didn't feel any pain while we were looking. This is possibly the scariest thing I've ever experienced. My friend said that he has seen that creature twice, and is not sure if it is a skinwalker, but it is the best thing you can match to it. His dad has never seen it, but hears stuff all the time, and the animals, well, they will start freaking out when nobody is around. His sister says we are messing with them, and I don't really care, since I have a clear conscience on finding them. Also, I had to walk about 3 miles at 2 a.m., and I'm 250 pounds. My fat butt is not doing this for fun if I see danger. I'm also working on my weight, so I'm glad I wasn't 300 pounds like I once was. I live in the San Francisco Bay Area. and there is a stretch of road between me and my girlfriend's house that goes through some ranches and thick wooded area. My girlfriend and I were driving back towards my house around 10 p.m., and while I was rounding a corner near the beginning of the woods, I swerved as I saw what looked like a tall, skinny, pale-skinned person standing by the side of the road and walking into the road. When I looked in my rearview mirror to see what it was, I couldn't see anything. But after I asked my girlfriend about it, she was clearly shaken and she said that she saw it too. We decided to stop talking about it for the time being and continue to drive deeper into the woods back home. About 15 minutes down the road, we came across a fresh deer carcass on the side of the road. And while I noticed the deer carcass alone as I was focusing on the narrow road, my girlfriend swears that she saw the same figure bent over the carcass. I drove by the carcass for weeks after when I went back to her house. We've both seen a lot of weird stuff on that small stretch of road, including more on that specific drive, but nothing else that I think I'd be worth mentioning or could be a crawler. I'm not sure where it came from. No caves I'm aware of are around, or if it was more than one out there, but I know to always be aware of what else is on that road with me late at night. So, for a while now, I've been calling crawlers skin gates. I feel like they go by a lot of names, so I don't know what to call it. My sighting occurred back in 2013, at the end of summer. I was about 20 years old. When this happened, I had no clue that these things existed in folklore, or even horror movies. I don't watch horror movies still to this day, because I feel like they just messed with my head. So what I saw, I had nothing to base off. I thought I was crazy for a while. This happened at my parents' house out in the country. They have a couple of acres of land and orchards are right behind them. Hundreds of acres surrounding them, and about 4 miles away, there's a really good-sized river. There's also canals everywhere out there. My family grows weed, and it was about time to harvest. So, on this night, my dad and uncle decided to go out and asked my cousin and his friends to watch over the crop. I decided to tag along because I wanted to hang out with my cousin's friend, who, at the time, I had a big crush on. So we're out there, probably an hour or two, and we hear commotion out in the orchards. It doesn't sound like any animals we know, and it was pretty loud for a couple of seconds. It dies down, and we waited for about a minute or two to go check it out. 2 people stay, and the rest of us decided to go see what's up. It's a full moon out that night, and for me, it seems pretty much like daytime. It's easy to see, and everything is lit up. Orchards usually have a couple of dirt paths that are a bit bigger than the rows themselves for easier transport for machines, sprayers, and whatnot. So we take one and walk up it a ways. I squat here and there to see below the tree line to see if I can make out any humans or cars that are not supposed to be there. And there's nothing. We're about 2 orchards in and decide to head back. Right then, I get the worst feeling in my gut. It's like this primal fear that makes me want to run, but I felt frozen. I looked to my right, about 4 to 5 rows in, and I saw this thing. It was tall and gangly, about 8 feet tall, and it was walking parallel to us. I could see its side profile of its face, and I make out sunken cheeks and what looks like hollow eye sockets, but deep. Its skin is a grayish white, and the skin texture reminded me of a dolphin skin. It was flesh and bones, but not in a starving way. More like how it's built naturally. I don't know why, but it never once looked at me. I really wanted to run, but I felt like if I did, it would have given chase. So I stayed next to my friends and didn't say anything to them, because they like trouble. We rounded a corner and it disappeared from my view. I questioned myself a lot. My most vivid memory, though, is seeing the changing shadows on its face and head while walking through the trees. I haven't seen once since, and I hope I never do. Makes me question, though, what else is out there that I don't want to find out. My dog typically sleeps right around my arm. His head rests on my shoulder, so he is facing the window. When I sleep, the back of my head faces the window. Anyway, it was just nearing 5:30 a.m. The dog wakes me up with extremely aggressive growling at the window. This growling I've only ever heard when he fights with other dogs. I was roused and I tried to calm him back to sleep. Within a couple of seconds, the growling turned into howls and barks. I looked outside the window, and my heart rate shot through the roof. The property line from my house to my neighbors is roughly 60 to 70 yards. Is 60 to 70 yards. I competed at state for track for the 100 open, 400, and 2 relays, so I can confirm this creature's speed was shocking. It covered the yard in no less than 3 seconds. Gray skin, long arms almost down to its knees, an elongated face, and anorexic-looking legs. It ran by swinging its arms like, I don't know, like a buffoon, not a runner's form. After collecting myself, I burst into my dad's room. I startled him, but told him to get outside with me. We briskly got outside with handguns as I tried to explain what I saw. There were no footprints or marks, as white-tailed deer are frequently in our yard. 37 years ago, my mother and I saw an entity outside looking in at us through the window. It was hairless, pale white, huge bulging black eyes, and it had teeth that were very small, very well spaced, skinny and pointed, almost kind of like an anglerfish. We hid for hours until we heard my father drive towards the house. We both looked out the window to see the being stand up from behind a wall. It was much taller than a human. It was hiding behind that wall, and I believe waiting for us to come outside. My father drove up the driveway, and we saw the silhouette of its body from the back. It was hunched over, staring at the car. My father saw it in the headlights and what it looked like perfectly. He drove at it, and it ran away into the brush around the house. It never made a sound. It seemed smart, but cautious, and the overwhelming feeling I got that night, that it was vicious and very violent. My parents spoke with police as we were so horrified about the encounter. After speaking to police, or the KGB, we were relocated and forced to never speak of the event to anybody. Within 30 hours, I was living in a new home, nearly 100 kilometers away. I have searched for so many years for an explanation. I've spoken with government officials. I have interviewed with people who lived near our home, and that was about 10 years ago. I still have no answers.